Hi, I'm Janae Sharp from the Sharp Index, and I was sitting down with Justin Bullock, MD, to talk about physician mental health and life in general. So thank you for meeting with me.
I'm super excited to get to talk to you.
Just for background, I was terrible at scheduling this. So people watching this need to know how bad I was at scheduling, because I was like, oh yeah, we were gonna meet. Yeah, so I really have wanted to talk to you for a long time. You won an award from like a bunch of people. They looked at people's work, and they're like leaders in healthcare and decision makers from healthcare systems. They picked you as like a great advocate. And I've been like silently reading all your stuff. And just, I wanted to talk to you actually about mental health advocacy in general, like things that you've worked on. It's something that matters to me too, because I think a lot of people are pro advocacy without realizing what happens with advocacy and like kind of the actual process. And general people don't really know about what that looks like for mental health and physicians. Also, we could talk about anything you want to talk about if you have like a different topic.
No, that's amazing. I'm very excited. I want to hear your thoughts actually too, but I
have lots of thoughts. So should I go first? I can go first.
Yeah, you go first and I'll go second.
So before I decided to start talking about physician suicide and John's story, I sat down with my kids and kind of talked about boundaries and got their permission to share their dad's story. I wanted to have kind of a more perfect story or a perfect solution, like be, the quintessential like inspirational person. Mm-hmm. But the problem for me was like, I'm like not that person. I'm like the sarcastic person in the back of the room who's like saying funny things while it's like, sorry guys, this was uncomfortable for me. So advocacy, I've had to like decide my boundaries, like what I will and won't share. And I haven't always been good at that. And it's interesting because people see the things you choose to share. And I think that's important because I think when you take control of the narrative, you get to control the narrative. Like you get to say, this is what I think. Yeah. And that's been amazingly empowering because I've been able to get healthcare systems and individuals to recognize things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. Mm-hmm. But it's been personally, like, it's not always rewarding. Like, even though I'm an extrovert, like it's sometimes exhausting or people criticize you and some of it's fair. You're like, oh, well, that's fair, Mm-hmm. So drawing attention to yourself when you aren't perfect or don't have all the answers, or you're not like, coaching people is not always comfortable because I don't like to be bad at things.
Yeah. So much of that resonates with me too. In that one, I think there's sort of a misconception that like, just because I share something, that means that I'm like, sort of, it's easy for me to talk about. Right. And that like, I don't know that people always realize that it's emotionally taxing for me to talk about very triggering things. And I do it with intention because I like want to try and change the way things are done, but it's still not easy. And then I totally also agree with the learning your boundaries. I think that's something in this last year or last 2 years that I've been sort of trying to think about, because I think early on, I just wanted to like, oh, I'm just going to share everything, right. And be very transparent, even when I'm like not doing well and like all these things. And I think especially in medicine, but I think really in everywhere, people like you said, these beautifully packaged stories. They like you to say, oh, so, for me, like suicidality is something that I struggle with a lot in my life. And they want me to say like, oh, I was suicidal and now I'm better. And now I have it figured out. Now I'm never going to be suicidal ever again.
I'm cured.
And unfortunately, that is not how mental illness works. And so I think
like grief. They're like, oh, thank you for sharing their story. And we're done with it now. Yeah. They're like, could you be like, maybe like less bad now?
Yes. And so I feel like it's definitely a constant, and and sometimes I don't even understand why. Sometimes I feel more willing to share and less willing to share. And I don't know if it's the way that people ask me, or that's something that I'm still trying to sort of figure out for myself.
Some people are very good at getting me to share. And it's just something about them. They just have like that like good open energy.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, it's probably like other people can watch it.
Yeah.
I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so advocacy, I think, is harder. I think a lot of people too, they're jealous of the attention, but they feel entitled to attention without doing the work, you know, or they like want to share a story, but they don't actually care, you know, they want to be famous, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who are famous have something, they just have that charisma inside of them, and some people don't. I'm probably not like famous level.
Yeah, I think that I will say there's something that like is interesting when so in the medicine-y world, you know, like, so I wrote this perspective piece that was in the New England Journal, which is kind of like it was a huge deal for me. It's a big deal.
You know what? In medicine, that's a huge deal, guys. So like, I feel like people watching need to know that like, if someone does a study, then like someone else will try to one up them.
Yeah.
The New England Journal of Medicine is like one of the tops, you know, it's one of the top. It's top. Like everybody's like, blah, blah, blah. In the pissing contest of medical
medicine, that is,
which is a contest. This is a real thing. Like that's the top. So like, you know, that's cred. You have street cred there, like with everyone knows that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people after have reached out to me because people have, so first I'll say, I come from a place, like my institution, we clearly feel that our thoughts are worthy of like being in the New England Journal and sharing, because a lot of people submit things to there, where I think at other institutions that maybe is not sort of the culture. And it also, I always wondered like, how much is me being at UCSF, did that help me to, you know, publish on there? But regardless of all those things, I've had a bunch of people.
You're like, I don't know if it was just me or I mean,
well, I think it's a mix of things, right? I think it is. Yeah. It's like, you know, I have the like institution, like high profile name. You know, I'm writing about something that's sort of like a little bit contentious, or you know, like not sort of the norm.
It's relevant. It's relevant though. That's something that's relevant right now. But also, you took like a bold stance that most people. Like, I hide if I have mental illness. Anything, like if I have any issues, like I hide that on purpose. Like I'm happy to share the story of like someone else, but like, you know what I mean? Like what you did was brave. Like I understand that it's like contentious or whatever, but like also that could have been bad, you know?
And as I've had a lot of people who reached out to me who sort of asked me like, oh, did you like have an insight? Like who'd you talk to? Like all these things. And I just like submitted the piece. I just wrote it when I wrote it when I was in the hospital, and I literally just submitted like 3 days later. And so it really was not this like calculated thing. And so it's really interesting because on one level, it actually is like makes me a little bit sad, because I think people are asking for themselves because they want to like publish there. But the implied thing is like, oh, you have like an inside connection to get this thing like accepted. And so that's always an interesting like. And usually it's when people, the people who are asking me, they have things that to me, like, I think are just as worthy of being in, you know, like, but it's still, I don't know. It's an interesting.
It's hard to know if they're doing it out of like like, you know, because they're asking for a favor.
Yeah. I think I feel like for most of the people who ask me, that is their intention, but not necessarily the impact that I sort of feel, because I'm really proud of the fact that I just like submitted it just out of the blue and like, you know,
I tell people that though, I'm like, if you have a good story, you should be confident and just do it.
But that's a whole like,
I think that's an interesting topic though in advocacy too. Like people are like, well, how'd you do that? You know, and you're just like, oh, well, you know, well, my uncle is on the board of the New England Journal of Medicine. That's what you should say next time. Like make up the story. Actually, like, well, when my father donated $3 million to their fund. They said, oh, I guess we'll take your story.
Yeah.
Or like maybe you had a good story and it was good writing.
Yeah. And again, I was like, I think it's just like, and maybe this is my own thing. Maybe it's my own insecurity that I am like projecting onto them when people ask me this question. But yeah, but separately, I feel like my approach to advocacy, I really try to make, I try to be just like genuine Justin. And to me, that means like showing the good sides of me and the bad sides of me.
Right.
And I think that fits, at least for me, with my understanding of my mental illness, because like I think there are a lot of benefits to being bipolar that make me like more productive and like able to sleep a little bit less than other people and all those things. And I clearly think that there are bad sides too.
You're like, what about the weak people who have to sleep?
Exactly. It's so sad.
Sad. I had a friend who was an investor and like he never needed to sleep, and I was like, okay.
A lot of the very highly productive people around me, I'm always like, I wonder.
Yeah, you wonder.
Yeah.
Or yeah, there are advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there are advantages of people knowing that? Like, do a lot of the people that you work with,
Yeah. So I would say at least one of my mentors, who kind of the person who I do all of my research with, she like, since she's known, she actually is very attuned to my like work fluctuations. And oftentimes when I'm like going up, that's before I'm going to become very depressed. Right. And so she'll notice like, oh, Justin, you're like being super productive right now. Like, is everything like, are you okay? Like, and just like kind of check in a little bit more. And she's also very good at like, she asks me what, like how she can be more supportive and what, like, if this happens again, like, what should I do? And I feel like all those things are very good. Like she's very like consent. She asked for my consent before doing anything.
Oh, that's nice, actually.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. I'm bad at questions today, apparently. Although my kid in the background is like banging things around.
I guess one question for you is,
okay,
how have you changed since you started like in this space, sharing your story, John's story?
I feel like I've both like pulled back more, and I mean, I had a baby since joining the space. And that was harder than like finding the balance between like sharing things going forward in the past, I was always sort of confident that people would make a change, like, and I don't know where that comes from. Probably like, I'm like, well, they will listen to me. Mm-hmm. Like, I was like supremely confident. I don't know why, like maybe for no reason, but like, just like, and I'm still confident about that.
Yeah.
I think I've changed some, because when I started sharing my story, I was really in a bad place with grief, like just terrible, like worse than I probably publicly would have said. But I'm in a better place now. But it's hard to still have that story where it's interesting and like catch on to people's attention, and to like really express to people, like, you guys don't understand, you're asking people to share these stories and it's not always okay how you ask, and you're listening to the story and like getting inspired when maybe you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like maybe like I didn't realize how bad I was in terms of grief until much later, like I'm shocked at some of the things that I was able to share when I was able to share them. Like it was so fresh, and I was just like not okay, but like still like decided to just tell people.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that was part of my healing, but I also, sometimes I'm surprised that so many people that are literally like mental health experts or in healthcare, didn't realize that. Or maybe they did. And they were just like, some people were really patient with me in a way that I think was pretty amazing and like empathetic, but mental health wise, I'm like in a better place now. And I don't think I realized how bad off I was. Like,
Yeah. At least for me,
maybe you can relate to that.
Yeah. To me, sharing becomes something that like has kept me alive. It really like it's like it's been the only thing that's helped me find meaning in my suffering.
Right.
And I think when you're, at least for me, when I'm in this place of like just really deep suffering, like that's like a little tiny like ray of light that like at least other people can like share and connect to this like horrible, like this experience, this horrible set of experiences that I'm going through.
Or I call it like a shared humanity. I don't know. Like there's something about that authenticity that you have. I think that I see that you have that's like very relatable.
Yeah. I feel like that is, and that's something that is important to me. I think that to like, because I feel like part of it is I spent a really long time in my life being ashamed of like being sad. And I'm actually in a place now where like when I'm sad, I'm no longer ashamed of being. Sometimes I'm frustrated myself because I'm sad. I'm like angry that I'm like feeling sad again. But that's a whole another like sad. But being ashamed is no longer like.
I get that. You're like the sadness, shame. Yeah. What do you think? How do you think you have changed? Like besides wondering.
Yeah.
What you were saying with the journal and stuff, I was thinking like. When you get like recognition or have like attention, sometimes it's hard to know if people are authentic. Like for me, like it's like, are you just connecting with me? Like I kind of like having a low profile where people don't know if I know people or don't know what I do, like because you don't have to question people's intentions.
Yeah, I think that I have many feelings about that. That's something that I've been very public about the fact that I've had a challenging experience with my institution related to my bipolar. When the New England Journal came out, like an article came out, there was it was like widespread praise, everyone super proud, all stuff. Justin, you're so strong, whatever. But then when I was actually bipolar, then people really and not in a way that exactly, and not even in a way that compromised patient safety. When I was just like I got hospitalized, then I think then it felt very not genuine to me, like all of the previous praise.
Yeah, it's like they're supportive unless it means actual support.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Unless they have to actually like challenge something that is like scary or like it's easy to be supportive when all is good.
My child's showing me something. He's unpacked all of the Christmas ornaments since we started this. He's like playing with all of them.
Taking full opportunity because you are trapped.
Yeah, and my other children, I bet you $100,000 they're on devices upstairs.
They're smart.
While the toddler is down here disassembling the nutcracker. So I feel like I normally wouldn't say that, but like it's distracting me. Like I'm like, oh,
they'll give a little mother faces from behind the camera. Exactly.
And he's just thrilled. Like he doesn't even know he's being loud while I'm recording something. I'm like, great, Justin's gonna hate me.
No.
But you know what? We have some really cute little snowmen. I really appreciate what you said, like too. I was thinking about that, like when you're actually bipolar. Like I have some close friends who have bipolar disorder, and like, I've been there when they've like checked themselves into the hospital. Mm-hmm. And the boundary is difficult for most people. Yeah. Because you don't really understand what it is,
Yeah.
So this is like, it's like a little bit of a personal topic for me too, like mental illness. Yeah. Also because like with physician suicide and mental health, people talk about like how important it is to help someone, but then they don't always talk about like building healthy boundaries or like what that actually looks like. And yes, he's blowing up a balloon. That's why there's spit noise. Like they don't talk about like being able to, I don't know how to describe it. You might know what I mean. Like we talk a lot about physician mental health and helping people, but we don't talk about what that actually means.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
I had a friend who she was super challenging with her mental illness because she always needed something, but she would show up for people too. And so she understood more about like what she could and couldn't do than most people.
Yeah. I think to me, so I guess my personal sort of story related to that is so what happened this most recent time that kind of caused a lot of drama was I basically called out of work for like a few days and then attempted suicide and got hospitalized.
Recent? I didn't know this.
This is what led to everything happening, all the like drama. And I guess for me, what I would say is, so this is the third time in my life that I've tried to kill myself. And but I called 911 and like got myself to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, it was like, I know I'm going to be okay, like blah, 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 whatever. And so in a lot of ways, it was actually a huge victory for me. Because before I had like someone like I arrived was like urgent, like urgently intubated in the emergency room, like all that stuff, whatever. And to me, this was like, it's one of those things where like I clearly obviously wish that like I had not gotten to that point. And I actually like ultimately like got myself to the hospital. So I guess I feel like I should be like praised, not like praised, but like, I should be like,
good job, it's a big deal to do that. That's a big deal. Yeah.
And what happened was like the exact opposite, where I feel like I was like shunned and like penalized, and like my license became at risk and like all these things, when I had one, called out of work. I was not working for multiple days before it happened. 2, I never had any work issues, all stuff. And 3, I got myself to the hospital. And I feel like, so you guys clearly don't want people to like call 911 and go to the hospital. So like, what do you want me to do? Like the alternative to that is and I've been in treatment, exactly. I had been in treatment. I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, like all this stuff. And what they want in reality is to not have physicians who have mental illness. And unfortunately, that's like impossible to happen.
I feel like we need to like have some kind of maybe editing, like it's true. They just want you to not have a mental illness. Like, they want it to not be their problem.
Yeah.
Also, John died on his 3rd attempt. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I did not know that. No. Yeah. And I think it's like, and it's really interesting because there had just been a medical student at our school who had killed himself. And, there was all this like, oh, like we're gonna like, there's like this artificial rally that happens for a short period of time where everyone cares and like everyone's really sad and all these things.
It's like 2 weeks long.
Yeah, exactly. And then people just move on, and then they don't.
I would say it's 10 days long, maybe. Yeah, and then they just can't care anymore because they don't have any more energy for caring. My kid wants me to blow up this balloon, and it's a water balloon, and he's handed me 10 of them. And I feel like this is the perfect distraction from like our very heavy
serious,
right? Yeah. I have so many thoughts about this, like, and I feel like I'm not as good at interviewing you because I'm like, oh, John died after 3 attempts. I'm like, sorry, apparently I was just calling to interview you for therapy. We're gonna post online.
No, I think what it is like, I think to me what you're saying is like it's resonating, right? Like this means that this wasn't a new problem, right? Like it wasn't that like
and I think a lot of the times it's not a new problem. This isn't, people act like, oh, they died and it was a shock. I'm like, was it a shock? Because it isn't always a shock. And also a lot of the time people are doing the right thing. Like people are doing everything they know. They're trying to get help. Like I just moved from Utah, like where suicide is a leading cause of death. It's the leading cause of death for men between 18 and 24. It's not because they aren't trying to get help.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not because this is a giant community failure. It's because they have mental illness, or there's something that, like, maybe, maybe we need to open up the possibility that this is something people consider more than we admit. And it's also like not as weird and as like impossible as people think.
Yeah. Yeah, you just said something that I think is so insightful that I honestly don't think people understand, which is like, we have people who have like really bad like heart disease, and like they like die from it, right. But for whatever reason, like that's not a personal failure on that individual. But people don't realize that like you can have really severe mental illness and like be really struggling, and people die from mental illness. And I think that fact doesn't mean that we should be complacent. Like, we should clearly think about the like structural factors that worsen things, that make people less likely to get help and all these things. But at the same time, I think we don't realize that mental illness is like a medical condition.
Yeah,
that,
it's
like,
real.
Yeah.
It's real.
I
have a lot of personal like pain there too, because I remember about the same time John died, I had a neighbor whose husband like died of an aneurysm, and it was just like, it was like Jesus died, like, or someone, also my friend's brother died of cancer. This is a real story. And like, I was jealous. Like, I was jealous of the support, because like for some reason it wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I think it's with I don't know if medicine, I don't think medicine is lazy, but medicine is people.
Yeah.
And people aren't brave, and people aren't good at mental illness. They aren't good at their feelings. I don't love my feelings. People aren't good at it. And so we do a disservice to people with mental illness. And I think in medicine, especially, if medicine actually considered mental illness an illness the same way it does cancer, we wouldn't have as many people dying by suicide, but they just don't.
Yeah.
And they can pretend to. I mean, until you look at the numbers, like reimbursement, policy, reality, what's happened in your life, what's happened in anyone's life, then you realize, okay, well, your actions would tell me that you don't actually think that. So I don't need lip service.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a lot of what advocacy is. Like, look, your behavior is telling me mental illness doesn't count.
Yeah.
So dying by suicide is less. And, religions think that there's lots of history there. And you have to fundamentally ask yourself the question, like, do you think it's real or not? Do you think it's just someone being dramatic, or someone, taking advantage of other people? Decide.
Yeah.
And decide what that actually means in your daily actions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a little condemnation thrown out there,
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
When we post it, maybe we'll post it on a Sunday, so it could be like, so I could be here condemning people in healthcare. I mean, it's really annoying sometimes. It's like, do we have to pretend we care?
Yeah.
Everyone has stories that, like, they have an uncle or someone close to them who's had mental illness, but I think a lot of the way people address it in behavior is protective, and it doesn't represent people who feel like they can make a difference.
Yeah.
Like, I loved your story because it was like, you're like not ashamed of who you are, which is very rare. Like, that is rare. So maybe, see, I'm fangirling you too. I'm like, I like about you, there's not this shame. Like, because something about your experience has been like, look, I've been dealing with this. Like, I'm done with the shame. Something about you got over that shame.
Yeah. And I think for me, I feel like there are two big things. One, I have had a really, really intense like relationship with a therapist now for like almost 8 years, who really has kind of changed my life. And actually I have a story that I'm going to tell about him in just a moment. And I think the second thing is, as like the more that I share, it's just like at the beginning of sharing, I used to be really like kind of self-conscious and worried that I was like crazier than everyone else. And I may be, but like there are many other people who are on the spectrum with me
later when we're off camera, let's have a crazy contest, because like we can do this. I won't win, but I might have stories.
You'll give me a run for my money.
Yeah, like
yeah. And it's just like mental illness is literally everywhere. It's like, if it's not in you, it's in your parents, not in your parents and your cousins, not in your cousins and your friend. It's like literally, I do not think a single person can draw a like circle anywhere, like in any, like no one can have everyone is just surrounded by it. And so for me, it's just like, we're all just hiding the same feelings. And so why are we like doing, like why?
Or we're taking them out on people.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Exactly.
Okay, I want the story.
Yeah. So I don't know why I'm sharing this story, but I felt like
I've shared a lot of stories with you where I'm like, well, I was in a bad place when I started telling people things, and you guys don't realize that.
I was talking with my therapist recently, and this last like attempt was actually like, it was catastrophic for many reasons, because there was a lot of like healthcare. Sorry, I have a lot of
I didn't notice this because I hear you have a call later.
Turn off my like there was a lot of, I saw a lot of biases and stigma within the mental health system, both like as a patient and before I even got to like all my institutional stuff, where like, for instance, I take lithium, which is a med that there's like, you can test for your levels in your blood. And the psychiatrist who admitted me, for whatever reason, told my mental health team that like my lithium levels were undetectable, when in fact on admission they were detectable, but then they didn't give me my meds. And so then after like 3 days, then it was undetectable. And like maybe it was a mistake
anymore.
Yeah.
They didn't give it to you?
Exactly. So like maybe it was a mistake, but what ended up happening was then all of my providers thought that I was like lying to them and not telling, and like not actually taking my meds. And if there's one thing that like with my mental health providers, I'm very honest. Like I don't lie about stuff, and that's why they were. And so basically, it was just like all this like drama that ended up happening, and everyone sort of like belittled me to this like mentally ill bipolar person who like couldn't be trusted, who was trying to kill himself.
And that's serious drama, right? Because like if you read about bipolar disorder, sometimes it's like they don't take their meds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like that was an audience comment, because not everybody probably knows that's like part of it.
Yeah.
They're probably like, oh, he's doing it. They all do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a good villain voice. They all do it.
And so my therapist and I had thank you for.
I'm applying for the voice of evil, the evil people, the medical people. Yeah. Like, if you wanted to do like a book about this,
you can audio narrate.
Consider me.
And so this actually like, this was one of the like points. This is like my therapist and I actually had a big falling out around this, because for me it was very hurtful, because I was like, why would you not think that didn't make sense for like who I have you not known, and whatever. So and this is something we like talked about for like now at this point basically 2 years. And one of the things that he was saying to me was like, he was getting like a lot of messages from the outside world, like, you know, when he reviewed my case with his colleagues, basically like someone said to him, he's probably going to die. Like he's probably going to kill himself. I
mean, statistically, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You better not.
And
get you.
And it was really interesting because like, that's sort of the first time that I've like heard myself be talked about from like, because we have patients who have like really bad liver disease and say they're probably gonna die soon, like in the next 6 months or, you know, whatever. And my therapist was like, but like, this was like, we kind of do like some interesting like dual processing together in therapy, but he's like, right. but this is just it, you know, like this isn't just like any patient, this is, you know. And so it's really interesting. I don't know why that story, like I still am like, I'm saying it because I'm still processing all of the like layers that means. But also like, it's kind of crazy because by statistics, like I definitely should be dead.
But I'm like, statistically, yeah, like third attempts are successful.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that your therapist, like, I don't know, I think that would make me feel seen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but also it gives you a little faith in yourself.
Yeah, it does actually. You're right. That no, I agree with that. I did not, and I agree with that. It makes
Like
me proud to be like, you know.
Yeah, like you have this thing where maybe being suicidal is something that's going to be in your mental health or going to be part of your narrative, but like you know the steps to like avoid it.
Yeah.
And I also say I always appreciate when people are like, I'm glad you stayed. Like I'm glad that you're here, that you can even like share your story. Like that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like
yeah, it is. It's crazy because like it's always a long process of like coming back, and like it's interesting. This third suicide attempt itself was not. I emotionally bounced back from it like kind of quickly. But all the other stuff that happened then just like dragged me down deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it was crazy because I was just like, yeah.
This reminds me of one time, like we're almost running over. I know you. So I had a story. So I got to visit the hospital sometimes with, and I would always bring them animal cookies. So I was like the crazy animal cookie lady. I'd like go down to there was something like apparently I was helpful for like people. They're like, we don't know what it is that you do. I'm like, I don't know, guys. You do the math. Bring people animal cookies. Maybe they would be happier. You're here in the hospital.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just felt like there was a lot of shame.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a lot of people there too in the hospital that are like, well, you're burdening your family. I'm like, oh God, this is such a buzzkill.
Yeah.
Like a lot of, I mean, some of the therapy is helpful and some of probably just like some of advocacy or some of mental health discussions are helpful. And some of them it's just like a buzzkill.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, oh God, like, yeah, it is sad, like horrible and sad. And it's like they just want it to go away, like you said.
Yeah.
But instead, it's just I'll eat animal cookies at group therapy when the one person shows up and is like, I don't know, guys, like to the leader of the therapist, they're like, Jesus doesn't want you to do this. I'm like, that seems kind of negative. I'm like, newsflash, that isn't helpful. Like that doesn't get my laundry done. Mm-hmm. Like, and I think a lot of it isn't helpful. Like, it isn't helpful.
Yeah, my sisters are very like whenever they visit me in the hospital, we have very dark sense of humor, and so they're usually like cracking jokes, like even on like day 2 post suicide attempt, you know, and
that's like our family too. Yeah. We're like, well, the linens still suck. Like if I ever become a billionaire, I'll tell you what, we'll buy better bedding for this place. Like, never mind the therapists that some are clearly working out their own shit, but like, could we be a little better?
Like, need the 400 thread count.
There are no snacks. Like these people are having a hard time, so give them no snacks. It doesn't make any sense. Like, yeah. And I feel like that's a lot of what I feel like that pretty much sums up mental health for me. Yeah. Like, oh, you're sad, no animal cookies, and you're going into nephrology, so it relates. Like, oh, you're fat, no more good food, which first of all is rude.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to know. What do you think is missing? Like, what are people not doing right? I mean, you don't have to say that. I mean,
yeah. Well,
what's missing in the conversation? I know you have
oftentimes. No. This is really good. No, I think a lot of times, like, and this sort of relates to something that we've talked about before, which is this. Some people also I need to. I'm gonna hurt. Okay, I'll say this in 1 minute, and then we're gonna hang up. I'm meeting with the chief of nephrology somewhere for that apply to.
I'll
Maybe
email
this
them.
idea
I'll
that,
call them
like,
up and be like, sorry.
I think that people don't, I don't think that people see the struggle that happens before someone kills themselves. I think that I think a lot of people, like you said, people say like, oh, it was so surprising, I didn't see anything. And I think people don't see the like fight, like how much people have fought to like be alive until that point. And I think that takes away the humanity from like this whole process. Yeah.
You're right. I read somewhere, I think it was an advocate that was saying like, you don't die on your first attempt of reaching out. Like it's like the 1,000th attempt of being turned down for getting help.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we need to continue this conversation in the future.
Okay,
yes.
I'm gonna stop recording. All right.
So yeah, we'll talk.